Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio. Broadcasting today from the kitchen of the Bible Bistro. So glad to have you here. Come on in, sit down. We've got some good stuff cooked up for you today. Well, actually, I don't, but our psalmist David does. He is going to give us some really good stuff here in Psalm 29. Psalm 29 has been our subject this week, and yesterday we saw the division between 6 and 7. We talked about that, how 6 really goes with 5 and what comes before 5, 4 and 3 particularly, and 7 really goes with 8 and 9. But mostly 8. And so we're going to look at today 8 and 9 and see the relationship between 8 and 9 and some other verses in the psalm. And again, the subject is the voice of the Lord. Let me read for you then verses 8 and 9. The voice of the Lord causes the wilderness to be in anguish. The voice of the Lord causes the wilderness of Kadesh to be in anguish. The voice of the Lord causes the rams to dance and strips the forests. And in his temple everyone speaks of glory. I love that last line, don't you? Everyone speaks of glory. Why is that? Because the voice of the Lord is just that grand, the grandeur of God. And it's only his voice that's being described here. But the grandeur of God is what we are talking about. Now, in verse 8, talking about the wilderness, and then we get specific, the wilderness of Kadesh. And this verse 8 is so much like verse 5. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. He breaks the cedars of Lebanon. So we have the first statement of the power of the voice, and then we have a second statement which includes a location. So now we're going to talk about the voice of the Lord causing the wilderness to be in anguish. That is, that the wilderness is in anguish for moisture, for rain, for sustenance, what a wilderness might need. And the voice of the Lord is the one that's put them in that situation because there's no rain there. But now specifically, we go from the broad sense of that idea to the narrow sense, Kadesh. Now, if you look at your Bible maps, you'll notice Kadesh is down to the south. The children of Israel traveled through Kadesh as they came up from Egypt. So the area of Kadesh now is specifically mentioned, just like Lebanon was mentioned there in verse 5. So we have the voice of the Lord causing the wilderness to be in anguish. And then in 9, we come to 9, and suddenly the voice of the Lord is doing something delightful. You might have the voice of the Lord causes the hinds to calve, and that's okay. That's a fine translation. So the voice of the Lord causes the rams to dance, and perhaps they're dancing because they're calving. But it's the voice of the Lord that's doing this. He's the one causing. Notice the causative nature in all of these verses, 8 and 9. And in 7, he cleaves the fire. In 6, he makes them skip like a calf. In 5, he breaks the cedars. In 4, the voice of the Lord is strong and splendid. So you see the causative nature, the strong, splendid voice now has this effect on all of these aspects of nature, specific places and in general places as well. So he causes the rams to dance and strips the forests bare. In my native land of Kentucky, several years back, there was the remnants of a hurricane that came up through Kentucky and just absolutely devastated some forests in the western part of the state, stripped them completely bare in places. Trees were blown over in straight lines, leaves torn off trees. It looked like wintertime in the middle of summer. In places. It was an amazing thing to see, the very force of nature. Well, that's the same idea here, and it's because of the voice of the Lord. And then finally we end with this phrase, and in his temple everyone speaks. Now, don't pass that word by, speaking, because what have we been talking about? The voice of the Lord. So the voice of the Lord has been doing this. Now we're coming into the temple, and we're not hearing the Lord, but we're hearing all those who are in the temple speaking of glory. And remember, I said at the very beginning of this week that we're in heaven. This is a heavenly perspective because we heard the very first thing in verse 1 was, oh, hey, angels, come on. Come in here and let's worship the Lord. Now, in his temple, everyone, who's the everyone there? Go back to verse 1. It's the angels, the sons of God, the mighty ones. So in heaven, all those people in that temple, what are they doing? They're speaking of God's glory because they're watching as the voice of the Lord does his work in this world. And guess what? He's still doing a work in this world. All right, we'll come back to verses 10 and 11 tomorrow on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.